Good afternoon. I'm Joe Fetterman, Executive Vice President, Colliers Life Sciences Real Estate Advisors. And this afternoon, we have a special treat. We're here with Anthony Maher at University Place Associates. He's the president there. And Jason Kaufman, Senior Vice President and Head of Fund Management at Silverstein Properties. And these two gentlemen have just completed an incredibly meaningful deal to the Philadelphia Life Sciences clusters. And we're delighted that you can both be with us this afternoon. So welcome, Jason and Anthony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
So why don't we take a quick second, Jason? I'm thinking we go back about 6 months ago when you approached us to talk about specifically Philadelphia and more broadly nationally, how you all could really jump into the life sciences real estate sector. And by George, you've done it. So tell us a little bit about what created that momentum in your company and why Philadelphia and how we got here.
Sure. Thanks again for having us, Joe. For us at Silverstein Properties, we're a 63-year-old privately held firm. And Larry Silverstein, our chairman, 89 years young, still comes to work every day. And he is always a forward thinker. And what he realized is that an investment we made into a loft-style building occupied by conventional office tenants back in 2017 was ripe for conversion to life science. And we had some other advisors coming down from Boston suggesting if you build it, they will come. We pre-built out 15,000 square feet of a 40,000 square foot floor. It was leased by one tenant immediately soon after we put it on the market. And we realized we were onto something, and we've since had a lot of success on that asset. We've named that Hudson Research Center. And so we've since invested in a second deal just 10 blocks to the north in New York, and we're pursuing a couple others. So we knew that life science was there. Back in Q4 of 2019, we put an investment committee presentation in front of Larry, and we said, there's got to be opportunities in other markets. The natural expansion for us outside of our own backyard in New York was Philadelphia, right? We are co-sponsors with the Arden Group on 1735 Market Street. We love the macro fundamentals of the Philadelphia market in terms of employment base, cost of living, business-friendly environment. And so we started poking around. We have aspirations to build a national life science portfolio, but we also want to be very methodical in our growth. And so Philadelphia checked that box.
And Anthony, you have a long time of all kinds of innovations here in Philadelphia. I'm thinking about Benjamin's Desk, and now your partnership with Scott and the vision that you've put into University Place 3.0. Tell us a little bit about that, and then the process of looking for a partner, how we got here, and how you connected up with Silverstein Properties.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, first, thanks for having us. I've been tracking LabNotes and find them super enjoyable. So appreciate you having us on. I joined Scott Mazo 2 years ago. It was his vision that we've been executing on since 2 years now. And we put together a phenomenal team from Dale McDonald Strategic Alliance to architects like the Short Partnership, engineers like McIntosh and CRB, Jim Daly, a friend of yours, Joe, and really tried to approach the market with the lens of, well, how's the end user going to interface with our building? And many of you have seen our marketing 3.0 University Place. We're located at 4101 Market, and it's a pile of dirt right now. And we wanted to start from scratch and say, well, how will the end user leverage this building to their advantage? We knew it was happening in life sciences in Philadelphia, and we started to be really thoughtful around, well, let's look at the building and look at a vertical ecosystem inside of our building. And Joe, you've probably seen many times we've tweeted out about the currency of partnership and the currency of collaboration. And we were fortunate enough to collaborate with the Wistar Institute, and they start to share a little bit more of their vision and their growth needs. We start to collaborate and partner with the Ben Franklin Technology Partners around incubator space. And then we just surrounded ourselves with the right advisors, some of the top scientists, the top entrepreneurs in the city of Philadelphia, to help punch holes in the boat and say, hey, this is what's needed in the ecosystem. And so we felt like we had a very hyper-local approach to how we are addressing the market, not only to how we differentiate, but really how to put together something special so these companies can grow. The full life cycle of a company, from someone looking for a bench to someone looking for a full floor plate. So it was Scott's vision. She's 7 years ago to purchase this land and to leave an impact on University City in West Philadelphia.
Well, you know, guys, this is a great opportunity to somewhat look at the anatomy of a deal. So you each had your perspectives. You know, Jason, you guys were looking to break into life sciences. Philadelphia was a logical choice. And Anthony, you looking to do everything you just described in terms of building an ecosystem. So how were you guys the right guys? How did you find each other? What were the conversations like? Where were the sticky parts? Where were the synergies? What made this thing really go? Give us a look under the hood.
Anthony, would you like to go first, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
Take a stab. I'll
Okay.
piggyback.
All right. Joe, I think I'd be lying, and I think Anthony would agree. I'd be lying if I told you it was love at first sight. You know, we were looking at the market closely. We immediately got a lay of the land, and not only in University City, but understanding the Navy Yard, understanding King of Prussia, understanding how the entire Philly metro region works, and the Pennsylvania life science ecosystem has evolved. And what we quickly realized, not too dissimilar from the experience we had in New York, is we wanted to be closer to the teaching hospitals and the universities, right? That was very important for our investment thesis. What was also important is when we chose to use our Opportunity Zone Fund as the main investment vehicle, where were we going to have a transformative impact in a submarket within Philly? And West Philly was that submarket, and Scott's experience, decades-long experience in West Philly, also really got us comfortable that he knew the local players, right? And that's something that Larry Silverstein has always done, right? Whether it was being a pioneer to build homes for 2,300 families on the far west side of Manhattan, he bought that land in 1984, delivered the last housing unit in 2010, right? So what we quickly started to realize is that the Silverstein organization and UPA have a long-term vision for growth and placemaking. And that was really important to us. And that's really what started to get us more interested and get us comfortable with them. Then when we layered on the fact that, we don't fault UPA at all, but I think the sticking point for us is Scott and Anthony knew where their land value and the value creation potential was. We as an investor, 7 years after Scott tied up the land, had to recognize that despite a very favorable supply and demand fundamental in U City, right? Wexford and Ventas have 0% vacancy. Schoolfield Yards hadn't yet announced 6 months ago what their intentions were. We liked the dynamics, but we also saw potential headwinds. And so Scott and Anthony, to their credit, were very flexible to, as the saying goes, put their money where their mouth is. And so we structured our deal in such a way that so long as we hit pro forma, and as long as we get to the end result that they pitched and the vision that we share with them, everyone's happy and they're incentivized to help us get there. What was also very important to us was that while Scott has incredible decades-long experience in real estate, it was less so on the commercial side. And it was actually Scott and Anthony's idea to say, hey, listen, how do we turn you guys from a fungible source of capital to more of a strategic partner where we can actually co-develop this thing together, right? And when I brought that back to our investment committee and to Larry, jumped on it. And it really solidified that for us. And I don't think I've ever told this to Anthony, so you get to see his reaction. For us, that was the turning point. It was less about dollars and cents, and it was much more about finding a partner who was self-aware and who was willing to share in the execution of creating some real value.
That's a great point to make. Just the importance of that partnership and them seeing how you could not only be a source of funds, but also a huge strategic benefit to the project.
And by the way,
Anthony, I'm curious. Go ahead.
Yeah, Judge, I just want to add one more thing. I'm sorry, it goes without, I think it goes without saying, but it's important for this medium to put it out there that, the partnership between Scott and Anthony was also an immediate attraction to us, right? I mean, Scott understanding the bricks, Anthony understanding the placemaking and creating that ecosystem, right, with Ben's Desk, and now leveraging that into a life science focus. For us, it was, I mean, that was as much as the dirt and the pro forma. We're investing in people, right? That's at the end of the day what this partnership is about, and then them letting us into their tent. So we got very comfortable with that immediately.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was simply going to say that, Anthony, I imagine that when you guys set out on this initiative to find a money partner, that you didn't expect it to turn out quite like this. And please continue.
I think any entrepreneur will tell you that having that level of agility is important to find great partners like Silverstein. But it's hard not to mention the team that brought us together. It's almost like that person that introduced you to your partner or your wife. And Brett Siegel from JLL Capital Markets team has worked with Scott for longer than I've been here, over 3 years, and really encapsulated what Scott wanted in a partner. Scott led every conversation with, I want the partner mindset, and here's the partner mindset I'm going after. And so as attractive as many of the institutional investors that came to us over the 2019 and 2020 period, I did think it was going to be a little bit more transactional. I felt like we weren't looking for strategic partners when it came to development. And then when we sat down with the Silverstein team, the short answer is, Joe, when you look at what Silverstein Properties has accomplished as a real estate organization, and you can't forget Cantor Fitzgerald as well in the financial services industry, but specifically Silverstein when it comes to development. When you combine, and Joe, I'm big on kind of putting formulas out there that turn into an equation to support success. When you combine our hyper-local knowledge and those key relationships I mentioned earlier with Silverstein's global experience, on top of everything happening in Philadelphia, life science, it creates a powerful formula for us to execute on and make long-term impact. And, everybody knows about federal opportunity zones. They think long-term. And that married up to Silverstein's mindset. They had a long-term approach. So they liked the cluster of land that we had at 41st and Market, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. And they were thinking long-term. And Joe, you remember, in 2019, the city and PIDC, and I think you guys even helped put out a report. And that report, amongst all these giants, Ventas and Wexford, Schuylkill Yards and Brandywine, AVR, Brian O'Neill and Discovery Labs, they talked about our project at 4101 Market being one of the most thoughtful and responsive to Philadelphia's burgeoning tech needs, biotech needs. And so I think when you marry up long-term approach with how we were thinking about ecosystems, and ecosystems don't happen overnight. And in this real estate world where people think they can create an ecosystem without thoughtfully thinking through that playbook, the mindset of Silverstein Properties and UPA really aligned. And I can tell you, if Scott was on this call, he would say the same thing. And I think Jason remembers one of our first conversations over Zoom. Scott asked, what type of partner would Silverstein be? Tell me a story about Larry Silverstein. And the one story that sticks out to Scott to this day is the type of landlord Larry was, not the successful investor, developer, the type of landlord he was. And Joe, that's coming back, like the old school level of engagement with tenants. And I've heard through specific tenants in the market, even big name ones, that would say, well, how are you going to engage? And so there's a lot of alignment. The easy answer is like, hey, that's Silverstein. Of course, we'd love to be married with them, but there's so much more, so many layers to their culture, their values, and the alignment between how we see UPA growing in University City.
You guys have done a great job of sort of underscoring what the pivotal moment, kind of like, yeah, I think this is going to get done for both sides. So you've covered one area I wanted to explore. Were there any hiccup moments where you thought, oh my gosh, I don't know. We might not get there from here. I don't know a deal that doesn't have that moment. So
I'll go
curious.
first. I'll let you off the hook. Hey, look, you know, Jason's also one of the visionaries behind the joint venture OZ fund, or joint venture between Cantor and Silverstein Properties. So he brings a layer of sophistication to the deal. And so, Joe, you know, when these negotiations go back and forth, you're on phone calls late night, you're on long text message threads, you're documenting emails, you're recalling phone calls and quick conversations. And you know, I think Jason appreciated our ability to be flexible, but I don't know if I've ever said this to him, we appreciated his creativity in the moment of negotiation, where it wasn't Silverstein on one side and UPA on the other side. Many times in that tough conversation, Jason would somehow find himself in the middle of the table and saying, Anthony, that's not making sense. This is how I think I can craft it. Cantor, Silverstein folks, how do you feel about that? I mean, it was that was refreshing. It wasn't a, you know, go for the throat mentality out of Silverstein Properties and Jason. And I'm still bruised a little bit, but it worked out well.
But now we're partners, and now I'm here to help you nurse your wounds and get us back on our feet, focusing on the big prize.
That's right.
You know, it's funny that Anthony was alluding, you know, as deal guys, we tend to have short-term memories and just focus on the positives, because that way we can get up and go do the next deal. There wasn't any one particular. I would say that it was really on the edges, and the hiccups we were having were really just around the delineation of responsibilities and looking forward. You know, something that, you know, not everything can be captured in a JVA, and so what is the spirit of the agreement? And where we would get tripped up is, okay, this is what we're going to sign to today. What happens? Because, right, as any good partnership should do, we should plan not just for the upside case, but if things turn on us outside of our control, how are we going to be there for each other? And how do we capture some of that in the document? And how do we just rely on each other's word? And to the latter, there were times where they were healthy conversations, but they were also, you know, across the table negotiations where, listen, if this happens, we expect you to do this. And, you know, it's difficult to put that right. And so that was one. The other nuance I would say, Joe, is really not either of our necessarily fault, or it was much more just that there are limitations with OZ investing. We have to get the money up by a certain date. We have to do, you know, we have to be tax matter experts and for reporting purposes. And it was more that along the fringes, and that's where Cantor was really very helpful, and our outside counsel in coming up with creative solutions so that we were able to overlay the spirit of the business negotiation with the realities of the limitations of our opportunity zone investment.
Guys, I want to thank you both. I think you've really given us a feel for the process and the creation of this partnership. And it's great to hear about. And I'm really excited about what you both of your teams create as the project moves forward. And it's really a good pivot point to talk about the project and what are the unique attributes of this project. How will University Place 3.0 and potentially future projects differentiate from the other offerings in the market? Anthony, you've talked about it a little bit, but maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, a few things. The first thing that comes to mind, and that you usually hear from me when we're on panels and through our marketing, it's just the power of the Wistar Institute. They're a collaborator, they're a strategic partner, they're on weekly calls with us. They're thinking through how to attract their network, which is national and international, to work and be in proximity to the science and the great labs that they're running out of their institution. So I always point to the Wistar Institute as our anchor differentiator. But then when you really want to get your hands dirty, you look at our lab infrastructure, Joe, and from the helps of Jim Daly of CRB, Brad Randall of Bruce Brooks, we just had one of the best teams really think through the thoughtfulness, earmarking space, creating space, having above and beyond type of resources going to each floor, very, very tenant first mentality. And so our lab infrastructure stands out amongst many, especially in University City. And then the last, you can't deny that, I'm sitting inside 2.0 University Place, a LEED Platinum building. And so when you look at our sustainability efforts and even Silverstein's history of having a sustainability point of view in New York City, that's a powerful combination. So this will be a LEED and WELL Platinum building. And, obviously in 2020, there's a lot of conversation around well and wellness and treating your employees and your team to something that's a little bit different and safe and secure. And we're proud that we've been leading that conversation for quite some time now. And so when you even look at 3.0, when it's all said and done, it'll be a LEED and WELL Platinum life science enabled building at the highest level. And 4.0 will be the same, and 5.0 will be the same. So you start to have this really, really tight message around excellence, and excellence that matters to the end user, to the community, to the planet in general.
Well, thank you. And as we look ahead, let's talk a little bit about the project timeline. When do you start moving dirt? When do you get a first occupant in the building? What's that schedule look like right now?
Anthony, you want to take it?
Sure. Gosh, we made this announcement 2 weeks ago, right? 2 weeks ago
Right.
tomorrow. And we've been heads down and being on the same side of the table for those past 2 weeks. So we finished up a whole week of workshops last week. The team actually drove in. We physically distanced safely and had some workshops. We did more Zoom meetings. That took place all last week. In fact, Friday was a heavy one, Joe, where we had back-to-back key critical pathway discussions. And so this week we've been just processing what that looks like. We have a permit in hand. We have our equity partner. We're going after securing debt. We have another announcement that we'll make maybe next week or at the end of this week that'll really crystallize our timeline. But we hope to be in the ground early next year. And obviously life science tenants need to have a really strong date associated with when you break ground and when you deliver. So trying to be really thoughtful. I think the page that we saw out of Silverstein's playbook was let's make sure we set the right expectations. Let's not overpromise. Let's set the right expectations and take people through this journey of messaging that paints a picture. And then we can announce the specific groundbreaking date. But Jason, piggyback, I know you got your strategy thinking.
Yeah, no, you hit on it, but just to carry that ball forward a little bit more, Joe, what interested us also in the investment was that Scott and Anthony had assembled a best-in-class team and put a bunch of coordinated drawings together with a permit in hand. So that gave us comfort that the budget was tight, that we knew what we were investing in. We worked out an ample contingency should one be needed. And, the diversity of the uses within 3.0, and the fact, by the way, Joe, we didn't mention on our discussion about the general structure, it was very important to me personally, but also to the organization that we got a ROFO on 4.0 and a handshake on 5.0. I mean, this is really going to be, this is the first of three, is the way we're looking at this. It's a failure if it's only one. And so the best way to achieve that long-term goal is to get in the ground now. And so that, that work session, our head of development and our development manager were down in the same room as in Philly with our general contractor, with the architect. So groundbreaking, outside date end of Q1, like Anthony said, running parallel paths to secure more pre-leasing and to get a construction loan in place, then delivery a couple years thereafter. So it's full steam ahead. We know that the supply-demand fundamentals support us moving aggressively, and we're prepared to do that with our partner.
Well, Jason, as we wrap up, I can't help but want to come back to something that you said earlier offline, which was about deal making in the COVID period, and in some ways one of the reasons why this deal got done. So if we can step back and pick that up, I think it's worth it. It was a really striking comment that you made.
Yes, we with our Opportunity Zone fund, we strive for portfolio diversification across asset type and geographic region. And I can tell you that we lost a multifamily deal right when the quarantine was mandated in middle of March. because we just couldn't get the team out there to do the requisite diligence as part of our fiduciary responsibility to our investors. Philly, on the other hand, at the time, without any traffic, was just over an hour drive from New York. And we brought the team down there in early August once we had a better sense of best practices for everyone to stay safe, but also acknowledging the importance of touching the bricks, right? Really touring the comp set. We toured 3675. Wexford was a welcome host for us, as was Ventas. And if it wasn't for our ability to go down and do the diligence that we would do in the normal course, Joe, what I mentioned to you is I doubt that the deal would have gotten done. I don't think we would have made the exception. So lucky for us. Listen, it always helps to be lucky. Here we are in New York, in a close drive away from Philly.
Yeah. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. Before I let you go, with this announcement, are there any other immediate announcements, some new tenant names that we can break right here? Anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up?
Anthony, I'm not letting Joe put me on the spot. It's all you. Go for it.
I'll throw some teasers out there, and actually piggybacks off what Jason just said. There's something special about Philly, not just because this is my city of choice, but when you think about the collaborative nature of Philly, Joe, and I've seen the tech ecosystem grow from a small tech ecosystem to something that's more vibrant. They would talk about it being a culture, startup culture, and you can feel it. And for Jason's team to come in, and they did due diligence, but they were welcome, to his point. Wexford welcomed them in, they toured, they sat with your team, Joe, they sat with JLL, they sat with other groups. And that just speaks to Philly's collaborative nature. And so I take some of that into my playbook as far as how I'm going to attract tenants. And it's not just, let's hire a broker and wait. I look at it through two lenses, right? Launchpad is Ben Franklin companies growing. They're not going to grow in 3.0, they're going to grow in the 4.0. We already have that playbook and formula. It'll complement Innovation Center. It'll complement CIC. It'll be favorable terms for the young entrepreneurs and scientists. But there's something that's Launchpad, right? There's something else called Landing Pad. And I think that's something I'll be focusing on with some other strategic players on the Silverstein team, about looking at some of these larger institutional players and saying, hey, how can you land here? And when you land here, can we open up more relationships? Well, Heather Steinman, that you've had on here before, she would be my first intro into some of those companies about what they're trying to achieve, what type of collaboration would be meaningful. Is it customers, capital, is it talent? What are they really looking for that we can connect them to? And a lot of times, New York's ecosystem, they got launch pads and landing pads, and they're really good at connecting dots. And that's why companies choose from all over the country, all over the world, to land in New York, specifically around tech. I think Philadelphia is set up at an inflection point to be a landing pad around cell and gene therapy. And the more developers and owners and partners and capital partners that can be thoughtful around making sure they land here and succeed here, the better. You'll hear out of my camp that we want to put the city and state and support them in helping them participate. Look what Boston has done. Look what Chicago has done. Look what New York has done around putting real dollars behind infrastructure and companies, and venture follows NIH, and NIH is blowing up here. So I think you're going to see before we lock in a tenant, one more strategic tenant, I think you'll see another collaboration announcement that will point to making sure we're doing this really thoughtful. And again, we're not just thinking short term, we're bringing that Silverstein mindset long term. I think it just raises the ecosystem. It's certainly Philly's moment right now in cell and gene therapy.
Well, that's great. So no breaking news here on this conversation, but it sounds like we're going to have a couple of announcements coming up. Guys, thank you very much for your time today. It's been fun to look at the anatomy of a deal, to look ahead to what you're creating at University Place, and really to the exciting future for the entire cluster of Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.